Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats. And a topic came up across my news feed a couple weeks ago about the SAT going digital, and it immediately got my attention because I have a kid who's at like just the right transitional period between
Mhm.
the current like pencil and paper, bubble form SAT and the new digital SAT. So this was really caught my attention, and I immediately thought to ask Lara Kilgore, who's the founder and CEO of Beyond Education, and she is my go-to person on questions like this. So I asked Laura, I was like, okay, can we have a guest post? Can we do an interview? Like, I need to know about this, and
Yeah.
it's not happening right away, but it's something like families need to start thinking about. So,
Yep.
Laura, thank you for the guest post. I want to encourage folks. There's a link in the description of the video that'll take you to the guest post. It's also at sachartermoms.com. But it's even better to be able to like have a conversation about it, and you know, for stressed out parents, kind of work through some of our questions about what does it
Yeah.
mean that the SAT is going digital.
Yep. Big changes. And as I've told people, it shouldn't come too much of as a surprise because everything is going digital, especially since COVID. And College Board even says, this has been a long time coming. It just accelerated this launch. So it does feel kind of scary and tenuous of like, oh my gosh, it's something new, right? And that can be sometimes overwhelming to navigate. But yes, happy to answer questions and kind of give you an idea and your listeners of what we can expect according to College Board. Obviously, none of it has launched yet, but thankfully they're giving us at least a 2-year notice heads up before it rolls out. So we've got some time to plan, which is really nice.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into more detail about digital SAT, I want you to tell folks about Beyond Education, which is the business that you founded. So what's the
Yes.
mission, vision, what services you offer?
Yep. So our goal at Beyond Education is to come alongside families to help your student discover their strengths and their purpose. And we do this in 3 ways, which is we want to build confidence through inspiring, empowering, and instructing. So that's kind of our big 40,000-foot view. But in terms of the actual services that we offer and how we do that, it can look like K through 12 tutoring. And we literally do everything from phonics and literacy, early literacy, all the way to AP Calculus BC and kind of everything in between. And we also do homeschool facilitation for those families who need an alternative option for schooling, whether it's they need to remediate maybe some classes and homeschool is the best way to do that, or if there's a medical reason or a unique learning style or disability, we help families navigate the homeschool world and kind of how to set that up and even provide them with instructors if they need it. And then as of last year, we started offering NILD therapy, which we're the only private practice in San Antonio that offers NILD therapy, which is a special cognitive therapy out of Richmond, Virginia. It's a multisensory approach of cognitive therapy. So there are 2 other practitioners here in San Antonio, but they're both attached to schools. So that's really interesting and a whole different conversation at another time. And then the last thing that we do, and that's my specialty and my niche, is college advising. So it's that cherry on top of, okay, we've done all of this work for the last 12 years, and now we need to summarize it into potentially a college application or exploring maybe other options and considering how do all of my strengths, how do what I've learned in the last 12 years about myself, about my learning style, how does it culminate into the next path forward, which might be college, adulthood in some capacity. So that's what we do.
What I really appreciate about how you approach college advising is that it's not this like kind of tiger mom rat race approach. It's very much about listening to the students, understanding the family dynamic and what those
Yeah.
expectations are, and like really helping them be like the best like self-actualized adult that they can be, and that it's not this external yardstick of success. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I appreciate you saying that. And I'm glad that comes off because that is definitely my goal. There's enough pressure on kids as it is, as we all know, and on parents as well. And so I tell people all the time, like, I find myself in this very fine balance or tension between, working with someone who wants to achieve and go to college and, do the things that need to be done to get there, but not making it feel like another source of anxiety or another source of like, here are the 20,000 things you need to do in order to, there's lots of different ways to get there. And so I tell all of the students that I work with in college advising is my role is to champion you through this process, and let's figure out what that is. So with a lot of my students right now, that looks like doing informational interviews, of figuring out like, what are different careers and how are the different routes to get there? Because I believe the final step is having an independent adult who can advocate well for themselves. It doesn't end when you get into college. As I learned the hard way, when we would get them into college and then they would call us their freshman year of college and be like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, okay, well, we need to do a better job because we did not serve you well if you are now not able to do this on your own. But yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I hear similar things from the charter schools that are most invested in having their students succeed, is that they realize like it's like high school graduation or college graduation, that's not the finish line, that there's a whole set of life skills and exploration that needs to happen. So I feel like, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, comically, I think it's when you can pay your taxes on your own that like you've made it, you figured it out, you can keep money in your bank account, like you've done adulthood. And for some of us that happens when we're 20, for some of us that happens when we're 40, hopefully somewhere in between there.
That's right. It's those little things. Yeah. I feel like it's important to frame this discussion that way, because I don't want to just go straight for the anxiety. I mean, I'm seeing lots of clickbaity headlines about, stressing out parents and kids about this, but like, that's like, this is a step along the way towards that independent, successful, self-actualized adult who can pay their taxes, order their own pizza, right? Or like my son, who can now do his own laundry. He's 14, but he even uses fabric softener. He uses fabric softener.
That's huge.
Yeah, gold star, man.
Oh, him. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it's like, but it's still we have to be prepared for the SAT going digital. So what exactly, as far as we know, what the College Board is telling us, what does that mean that the SAT is going to be digital?
Yeah, so absolutely no pencil or paper starting in about 2 years. It's going to be 100% on a device that can either be a tablet or a computer, laptop or a desktop. And that device can be provided by the student. They can bring it themselves if they have a device of their own, or it can be provided by the school, or College Board has said if there's no access to a device, they will provide one themselves. So yes, it's going to be 100% online. And then another key feature of it is that it's also going to be what's called an adaptive test. And I know we're going to go into that a little bit later. Many tests like the GRE and the MCAT, they're already structured that way. So in some ways, you can look at the silver lining, which is for those students who are looking at pre-professional career like pre-law and pre-med, they're going to have to take, or most grad school programs, you're going to have to take the GRE or the MCAT or maybe the LSAT, which will be a digital test as well. So you could look at the silver lining of, okay, we're gearing you up for maybe another test that might be coming down the road.
Right. Yeah. And even the STAR test is going all digital as well, too. So, wow. Starting in 3rd grade. Right. Well, no, let's go ahead and talk more about what adaptive testing means. So, so when I took the LSAT years and years ago, that was before it went adaptive. But there was a point before I got married when I thought I might be going to grad school, and so I did take the GRE then, and then it was adaptive. And so, like, as you went along the way, it felt like it was a shorter test, but it was hopefully getting better data even in a shorter test.
Yep. So that's exactly the point. So what the College Board is saying is that they are now going to be able to have a much shorter test. So right now the SAT, if you have no extra time or accommodations, is about a 3-hour test. And that's just from the start of the first section to the end of the last section. That's not including all the pre-administration, passing stuff out, things like that. This new digital SAT is going to be 2 hours start to finish of the test. And they said, really, you should also have a lot less pre-admin time as well, because you're going to get instructions the day before. You're going to get that set up. it's going to be a lot quicker. So the whole test should be significantly shorter as well. The adaptive component, how they're explaining it, is that of the 2 sections that exist, so math and then the reading and writing, each of those sections are going to be broken up into subsections of what they're calling modules. So as a student is going through the digital SAT, they're going to be answering whatever the questions are that they give them. And then after they complete that module, the platform is going to be able to assess how they've done and either give them more difficult problems to see, hey, you've done really well with these problems. Let's see how you do with maybe a different set, or maybe less difficult or same difficulty, but they're going to adjust it to really pinpoint their learning capabilities.
Yeah. So a comment in the Charter Moms discussion group, a mom who had maybe taken an adaptive test, and she said the important thing is like, don't just focus on answering the questions. Don't psych yourself out trying to wonder, are the questions getting harder? Am I doing well? It's like, just like, don't do the meta. Just focus on the questions that are right in front of you and do your best answering those.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and that goes even now for a pen and paper test, right? I mean, a lot of students we work with test prep, it's about the emotional or the anxiety part of don't stress yourself out. Don't amp yourself up over something that you can't control ultimately, right? Like, even with the paper and pencil, the paper and pencil, you can walk in and be like, oh, that was a really easy section. And then maybe you decide to take it again and you feel like that math was incredibly more difficult. So the most you can do, and I think that's the great part about College Board, again, announcing it so early, is to prepare and to expose yourself as much as you can to practice materials so that you're ready.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the test administration, right? That the timing is a little shorter, that most students are going to bring their own device, that they'll actually get information the day before the test about logging in. And then in the blog post you mentioned about accommodations, so sort of how that might work.
Yeah, so College Board is saying, and they haven't released too many details on the accommodations. All they're saying is that you can still apply for accommodations like you can now. Most accommodations that are available to students are either extra time, so that could be time and a half, or double time. You could also have a separate testing area, which that might be a little bit easier now that we can take it at testing centers or at schools. And then they do claim, now again, they don't give the details of how one can qualify for this, but they do claim that if you have a certain accommodation, you can still get access to a paper and pencil copy. I'm sure that they're keeping that information close to the chest so that everybody doesn't apply for a paper and pencil. So we're going to stay on top of that to see, when they start releasing that information of how you get that accommodation, so that families who are really concerned or who have done prep and have seen a significant difference between having a pencil versus doing it online can apply for that accommodation and hopefully successfully get it.
Yeah. So what ages of students or what grade level of students would first be impacted by the digital test? And is there going to be kind of like an overlap period?
Yes. So it is going to be this year's freshmen are going to be the first class of juniors. So the rollout timeline is that it's rolling out first to international test centers. So next March 2023, all international SAT test centers are going to go digital. And they say it's because it's going to allow them to basically, give the test a couple more times in international test centers. Fall of 2023, so that should be your son's junior year, they're going to do the PSAT completely digital. So for a normal trajectory of SAT test taking, you'll typically see it at most schools your sophomore year. You'll do a PSAT your sophomore year. That one doesn't really count for anything. It just gives you exposure. Then you'll do it again, a PSAT the fall of your junior year. That one is the one that counts for national merit and some other scholarships. So this year's freshmen, their junior year, they will be doing a digital PSAT. No exceptions unless you have that accommodation. Then the spring of those juniors' year, so that would be spring of 2024, all US, and they haven't given a month, they've just vaguely said spring. All US testing centers and schools will be on the digital platform. So a junior, so like your son, right? If you prepared and scheduled it well, you could actually, because we actually encourage a lot of students to start studying, like really buckle down the summer before their junior year. So if they buckle down the summer before their junior year, they could be prepared to take 1 or 2 of the paper copy tests their fall year, and then go and take the digital their junior year and be able to say, okay, which one did I do better on, and choose to submit which of those scores. So the juniors kind of have a good deal potentially, because there might be some students who do significantly better on the digital and then some who do better on the paper. And again, if you plan well, you could do both.
Okay. That's okay. And for anybody who didn't catch that, it's in the blog post. Like I'm still wrapping my head around this, about like, how the test prep is your work. I think that's something that I worry about. I'm excited about. I mean, I'm geeking out on the fact that it's digital, it's adaptive. Like I get excited about stuff like that. But on the other hand, I do worry when there's change. Like how will students in like who are this year's freshmen, like how will they prepare for the digital test? Like, would Khan Academy, add digital resources? And like how are folks like Beyond Education, like you and your team, like how are you going to coach students for the digital test?
Yep. So here's the nice thing, and you teed it up perfectly. Khan Academy still has that great partnership with College Board. They are actually going to be releasing this fall free materials for students to start preparing for the digital SAT. So students are going to have a good amount of time to expose themselves, prepare for it, and do well on the digital SAT.
Okay. That's good. And my son might be grateful because I was planning to have him do some Khan Academy this summer, but but there would still be some transfer, right? So he could start practicing with the existing SAT prep stuff, and for anybody who doesn't know, like Khan Academy is completely free too. So
they carry a minimum. Typically, they've carried a minimum of 8 free full-length tests, which is great. And then in addition to that, they have all of their topic-specific things that you can go through with questions. And I would say for someone like your son, I think starting this summer is great. It never hurts to start early because it really is about exposure. And I say this all the time. People will come to us and ask like, okay, we want to learn the tips and tricks. I'm like, there's maybe 3 tips and tricks. The rest of it is just doing the work consistently where your brain starts recognizing the patterns. Like you've just got to have enough exposure, just like most people playing sports, right? We've got to learn that muscle memory and just repeat and repeat and repeat until it just becomes second nature. So I think that's great to consider starting this summer in a way that's not stressful, but maybe more just a good habit building of like, all right, every week, we're going to do an hour or 2 hours and we're going to split it up in little 30-minute chunks so it doesn't feel overwhelming. Maybe you build that up over, every 6-month block or something like that. Because it can feel really overwhelming for students that we get who come to us like now, right? The spring of their junior year. It feels really overwhelming because most of them have not started any prep. So we're starting test prep in the middle of their junior spring semester. They have all their core classes that they're dealing with school. And then in addition, now we're saying, all right, now you got to carve out another 2 to 4 hours a week to do test prep. And when you add on top of that a potentially new platform, that can feel like a lot. So I always encourage the earlier you can start exposing, the better. It's never going to hurt anybody. It's only going to play to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, and I think that's what what little I know about sort of cognitive science, like that these like cramming doesn't really work. But if time is on your side, it's like compound interest. It's like if you just start early, time is on your side, and like small amounts early on can add up over time.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
and
it feels less overwhelming.
Yeah, and if you can build up a habit, then it's not a struggle each time to do the good thing. To do the good thing because it's easy. It's what you always do. But then, going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, like the goal is independent, self-actualized adults. And so if folks are listening, you have like a junior or even a senior, like don't panic that, well, I guess like this year's juniors and seniors, they've already taken the old test and or they'll take the paper test and
Right.
they don't have to deal with this change. So it's really like
Yeah.
folks like who have like class of 2025 and younger.
Beyond that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and to your kind of comment, and this is still going to be true of class of 2025 and younger, is, you know, we do have the test optional scenario that definitely was a great help for students who were applying when there was so much distance learning and during the height of COVID, when the SAT wasn't administered regularly. I think we're going to continue to see that. I would anticipate, what I'm anticipating and what I'm telling the students that I'm working with, for anyone who's applying to a competitive state or private school, we're talking like the UTs, University of Georgia's, Duke's, UNC's, I would anticipate those schools are going to start shifting back to an SAT or a test mandatory policy, because they can, you know, they're just that competitive, and they can require students to do that. So for those students who need to start putting a plan together, just keep that in mind, that schools may not stay test optional. Now, there's quite a few schools that have already said we're test optional for the rest of eternity. The whole University of California system was one of them that I think really surprised people when they came out and said, we're keeping it forever. You know, and there's quite a few great liberal arts and schools across the nation who have come back and said, we know that the SAT or the ACT may not capture a student's ability perfectly or well. And so we recognize that test may not be to their favor. And so you can still apply without it. But I think it's just something to keep in mind in terms of what the goals are down the road. What are you thinking about for college, and just being prepared? What you don't want to do is for juniors and seniors this year who, you know, are thinking that schools are still going to be test optional. And then we get to the summer and a school comes out and says, oh, we've decided to be test mandatory this year. And then they're scrambling to take a test. That's what we try to avoid. So
Yeah. That's right, right. So the idea is to make choices that keep more options open instead of closing off the options.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah. There's just a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of factors to keep in, to keep in mind. But I think it all comes back to having a healthy perspective about it. And I think this is something I learned early on. When my son got diagnosed with autism, that it wasn't going to be a straight line path. And that along the way there might be doors closed to us, but don't get discouraged because there's going to be another path, right? Like San
Yeah.
Antonio has some of the best community colleges in the country, and there's lots of like internship programs and certification
And
programs and
yeah, and great feeder programs as well. I will go to my grave banging the gong for community colleges because I feel like I really missed an opportunity. That's one of my big regrets from high school, is that nobody told me my junior year I could start taking community college classes that would transfer basically no questions asked, full grade, full credit to the colleges that I went to. My AP credits didn't really do that. It was quite a hassle. And so I keep trying to convince more students, and I know there's great charter schools that you have a better pulse on it than I do, but like Brooks Academy and things like that, who are now integrating that into the actual high school setting, which is great because you don't have to go outside of your high school to find it. But what I was going to say in terms of community colleges, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these community colleges, especially in San Antonio, have partnerships with some of these top state schools that everybody's dying to get into. So for example, there's an engineering program through, I believe it's Northwest Vista. I think that's it. You might have to fact check me on that. That has a partnership with Texas A&M engineering program. And they say, if you complete these credits with this certain GPA, you get automatic admission into one of the most competitive programs at A&M. And they're all over the place, in terms of those options. So yes, I love that you brought up community college as an option. I hope and I try, and again, like I said, throw it out there to every family that I can of like, this is a great option and a great money saver. You can knock off basically a zero off of tuition, sometimes two. So yes, lots of great options. And I agree with you. It is, I think, more people are coming to the realization that education does not need to be a straight path, and that it can take twists and turns, and it can take longer or shorter than what we may have anticipated. And there's lots of ways to get to the end goal, which is exciting. Sometimes scary, but exciting.
Yeah. And that I get excited as I talk to charter schools that serve high school students, like at how creative they are being about it. Like whether it's setting up mentorships for students, if it's like dual credit programs, early college high schools that have partnerships, and there are so many different higher ed institutions that are partnering with schools. So like some work with Texas A&M San Antonio, some work with UTSA, and some work with different Alamo colleges campuses, and like so, and some even with higher ed in other parts of the state too. So it's like that's on the drawing board. It's like like an explainer for that, because I'm still wrapping my head around it. But I just want to encourage families, like there's lots of options out there that, and it goes, like you said, it goes beyond just AP credit. There's a lot more, and like everything you do, whether it's like summer jobs or service activities, that helps kids. It's not just about like having like a list of like that you can cut and
resume
paste in
builder.
your college app. Right.
Yeah.
It's more like, what did you learn from that experience? Like, did you like it? Did you not like it? Did it seem pointless? Did you get all fired up about it? Like, was there a day that you made a mistake and then recovered from it? And that's a story you learned from that, and you can tell that story. That's where those essays come from. If all you do is stay home and play video games, you're not gonna have enough good stories. So don't do it.
Unless somehow you turn that video game playing into a Twitch account that makes millions, and then you don't need college anyway.
Right.
But
there you go. Or,
I
just went to an esports tournament the other day, so I need to watch what I say about video games.
But I do love what you brought up, and I don't want to distract us too much from the SAT and go down the college advising, although they are very much linked. But I do agree that, I had the point and then I lost it. So evidently I agree with you, and maybe I'll remember what that point was on. So yes.
Right. Well, no, but we were talking about like how kids get like life experiences and internships and things like all these things fit together. Like there's so much more to it than just taking this test or like doing those resume builder activities. You're meant to live sincerely these things.
Yes, you brought that up, and what I was going to say is you basically take my spiel to parents and students right out of my mouth of it's not necessarily about the resume builders. It's about what you've said throughout this entire segment of the self-actualization, right? Being able, and this is what colleges are looking for, being able to take a step back and reflect and say, I learned such and such. And that can look like exactly what you're saying in the form of a personal statement or the supplemental essays. I had a student this year who has worked at a car wash for the majority of his high school years. And one of his essays was based on a gentleman who he worked alongside at the car wash. Now, did he think that was what was going to come out of that job when he signed up for it when he was like 15 or 16? No, of course not. But in the course of talking and saying, hey, we want to talk about the diversity of your experiences and maybe how you've engaged with all sorts of different people and personalities and how that's changed you and affected you, that story bubbled up to the top. And, it was a great example of a mundane thing that he took for granted that actually was really valuable in expressing what he's learned in his course of becoming an adult.
Yeah, I feel like that, and we were talking about this a little bit before coming on the air, that's this moment that we're living in of like, it feels like the world is reopening. I'm not saying it's safe, it's, but we're just trying to navigate the safety as best we can, kind of day by day. But it does feel like, doors are opening again, people can get more real life experience, more face-to-face experience. And, I have great empathy for the kids who, graduated high school and started college, during the pandemic, having a really atypical experience, feeling disengaged. I mean, there's always summer melt, but past couple of years there's been COVID melt. A lot of kids got their life plans, derailed. And in fact, like the other day we were talking to Kip Forward about how they have a dedicated person whose job is to contact kids who dropped out of college in the last couple of years and help them get back on track, whether it's if they want to go back to college, if they want to start a new job, like, just make sure that they can be successful and that we don't let like this, being buffeted by COVID, change the course of their life.
Right.
So I mean, we've been through a really tough time, but it does feel like the doors are opening again, and
Yeah.
I hope that other families are starting to get sense that optimism as well.
I think so. I think we feel that, and I think it is nice, to kind of bring it totally full circle when these platforms start going online and recognizing, hey guys, like our pen and paper SAT isn't working anymore. We need to adapt to the situation and to the world and to the technology and improve and get better. And they're able to roll out something like this. I think that's encouraging because that kind of gives us a light of like, all right, no matter what happens, like we've got some scaffolding of stability that we can continue to work through issues. So I think
Hopefully the
that's
digital
encouraging.
SAT, maybe it's a more resilient SAT. Maybe that, if there's more settings it can be administered in, and
Yeah.
if there's additional variants, God forbid, maybe the SAT administration can be more robust, in spite of whatever comes at us. Just no
Yep.
electromagnetic pulses, okay? Just
No kidding. Although they do say, because I did see before we hopped on here, someone on the San Antonio Charter mom blog discussion. Sorry, I butchered that. But on your discussion board that's very active and lively, asked what happens if the internet goes out or if the
Right.
power runs out. The College Board has said that the test is made in such a way that the platform is made in such a way that it will be fine. Everything should be saved. And that even if you lose internet connection, you can continue to take the test. Again, I'm not behind the curtain in terms of creating that. My first question is, how does that work with the adaptability? Clearly that there must be some paths and routes that are already mapped out regardless of internet. But they even say, if you run out of battery, just plug it back in, turn it back on, and you should be good to go. Whether or not that comes to fruition, we'll find out. But the other thing that they say as well in planning is that for every test day, they are going to have designated customer service support lines that are going to be ready to handle that. And I would assume, deal with those issues as they come. And then with every testing center, they're going to have a designated tech person to handle those issues. So they are thinking about, how do we roll this out and trying to think of every possible problem. Of course, something will present itself nobody thinks of because that's just how it works. So yes, they do. They do have some things planned. It's not completely if Wi-Fi goes out or if we have another snowpocalypse, we should be okay. So
right, yeah. Well, and then I think the takeaway too is that one particular test isn't going to make or break a student's career. That there's it's part of a larger context, and students have they have teachers and counselors and parents and community members looking out for them and helping them get a step up to the rest of their lives.
Yep, absolutely. And by the time students like your son will go and take this new digital SAT, we'll have the class who went through the hell of trying to take the test during COVID, who were all test optional, can come and say, hey, you know what? I applied to a school without a test and it worked out just fine. And I had a great experience and we were all okay for it. So we'll have some more testimonials to share from that.
That's right. All the things we're learning along the way. Yeah. Great. Well, Laura, I'm so grateful for the guest post. I learned a ton from it. It lowered my stress level about, having a son who's part of this first cohort affected by this. And I hope lots of families can also read this post and listen to this interview and take away some good information so they feel more prepared, they can better support their students and feel less stressed.
Yep. I hope my biggest takeaway from our conversation, or the biggest takeaway from our conversation, is just to start early. Don't freak yourself out by looking at, what's to come. I say this all the time with high school students. I think it's a really great conversation to start talking about college and even touring campuses and talking about test prep and maybe sliding it into some summer work here and there. Just because it makes it less stressful. When you've seen it and you've attacked it and you've dealt with it a couple times, it's much easier to deal with than trying to take it all at once.
Yeah. Ease into it, start talking about it, and then it's not a big cliff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Laura. I look forward to seeing you in real life soon, but thanks for joining me on Charter Moms Chats.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. You can get a hold of us at our website,
Oh yeah.
beyondedu.co, or you can call or text us. The phone is on there. Yep, there you go. It's right there. So yes, thank you guys so much. We're a huge supporter of what you guys are doing, Inga, with San Antonio Charter Moms. I love that all San Antonio families and even more across Texas get choice. They get some choices in where their students go. And I think that's amazing what you guys are doing and just bringing knowledge and awareness to it. So appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I'm really grateful for how Beyond Education approaches, like supporting students and families in all these different ways. Whether it's all the
Mm,
the tutoring, from K through 12, the college advising, right, the NILD therapy. That there's lots of different services you guys offer. And it gives teachers, and tutors another career path. Like if they don't, if being in the classroom isn't working for them, they want more flexibility. They can. Connect with a
yep.
lot of students and build their own career, either doing homeschool support or doing tutoring and
Yep.
things like that. So I know you guys are
Yep.
always recruiting good teachers to be part of your tutor
Always.
group.
Always. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank
Yeah,
you so much.
yeah, thank you, Laura. Take care.
Bye.